Serious, Redditors who have seen an employee fired on the spot. What did they do that caused them to deserve it? Pulled down a male coworker's pants in the office during business hours while said coworker was talking to two female peers. The poor guy wasn't wearing underwear. The pants puller was escorted out of the office within that hour. I had an employee who was brought into the office for doodling on product packaging. The other manager in the room said, "Do you know why we have you in here?" He replied, "Because I was stealing." Yep, fired on the spot. Whoa, that problem solved itself. The fired party did nothing to warrant termination and the manager who fired her was dismissed. A young accountant, around 24, made an appointment to see her manager. Both parties agree that she informed him that she would be having surgery the following day to remove and biopsy a tumor. She wanted to discuss the status of her projects and develop a coverage plan for while she was on medical leave. He wanted her to delay her surgery until after a certain project was complete. While she was walking to Human Resources to apply for a medical leave of absence, her manager followed her and screamed at her about being insubordinate and insisted that he would fire her if she didn't return to her desk immediately. She calmly stated that this was a medical emergency and the timing of the surgery was non-negotiable, so he fired her in front of the director of Human Resources. He was terminated the next day, which I did not witness. She returned to work once she had recovered enough to do so, about a month later, if memory serves. That HR director was the only thing standing between that employer and a massive wrongful termination settlement. Shut down a mainframe. At noon, vendor tech went into wiring closet and started unplugging things which dropped the system at peak traffic. Was working and all of a sudden half of all traffic fails out of the blue and all my tools blow up with alerts. The guy that did it didn't have a work order to even be in the cabinet in the first place, let alone to unplug anything. It was also not the first time that guy had done it. They fired him and his manager. They fired him and his manager. That's my favorite one. Dude fricks up so bad his manager gets fired. My first job, I worked at a grocery store. I don't remember much, but I do remember one day when the store got crazy busy, and they had to pull people like me from other departments to work checkouts. They have me as a bagger, and the guy at the scanner is another guy that I worked with in produce. Now, when this guy gave change, he'd accidentally pull out an extra $5 and pretend to put it back in the register when counting out change. Then he'd slip it into his pocket once the customer turned around. I noticed this pretty quickly because he's doing it with literally every customer. Even if they weren't getting change, he'd pull one out and act like he forgot they paid with a card. After I noticed it, I saw him do it a couple more times and thought, wow, wonder how long he can get away with that. Not 2 seconds passed between me thinking that and me turning to see that night's manager with a police officer walking towards our checkout counter. Fired on the spot and arrested. The employee stole money out of a customer's bag while the customer was watching, while on like 3 different cameras. She was removed by police, and our senior most manager on duty went to the police station to fire her directly from there. Worked at a restaurant that was having a meeting with everyone present, including the higher ups. Pretty normal meeting and everyone is discussing changes they'd like to see or changes they'd appreciate, etc. At one point head manager asks if anyone else has something to share. This one dishwasher raises his hand and says, "I know I've not always been the best, but I'm gonna work on that. From now on I won't get high in the stairwell by the dumpster. I'll walk down the street on my break. You won't even smell it on me anymore. Promise." Dead silence in the room. Manager speaks up. Did everyone else just hear that? We all nod. Great, so now I have to look like an butthole and fire you. What were you thinking? Manager says. Dishwasher is shocked. But I said I was fixing it. You guys won't even know anymore. He was walked out and removed in front of the whole staff. I tossed some stuff into a bin next to the guy in the warehouse during a summer job in college. He thought I was throwing it at him and started yelling and coming at me. I ignored him and went on to the next shelf that I needed to put stuff away on, and he kept after me. At this point he was yelling so loudly that the shop boss heard him from the other side of the massive warehouse and had made his way over from behind the guy. The boss looked to me and asked what was going on, and I told him. The other guy was still yelling. He was gone in less than 10 minutes. It was his first day. If the guy was hot-headed, you're lucky he wasn't waiting for you in the parking lot when your shift was done. Department manager asked to go home early because of snow flurries. We said she and anyone else who was worried about getting home safely could leave, but if the roads are open the next day we expect them to come in. Next day comes and her entire department called in. They all have variations of I can't get my car out of the driveway. Day 3 comes. One of her underlings admits that on the day of the flurries, the department manager told all her people to meet in a local parking lot and told them that they all better call in the next day or she would make their lives a living heck. This was apparently to teach the owner a lesson. Once we got another employee to confirm the story, she was fired on the spot. The best kind of plans are the ones that rely on tons of people not saying anything. A guy started his first shift at a pizza place I used to work at. He said when he worked at Hardee's if someone came in he didn't like he would pee on the grill then cook their burger. Owner overheard this and fired him. What a reasonable and mentally stable coworker. I made the mistake of hiring a friend who was going through a difficult time. I was going through a separation and I had to leave every couple of weeks or so to spend time with the kids. One day on getting back I found out they'd been leaving hours early all week to set up a competing business. When I asked them about it, I withheld some information I already knew, and they lied to me. Breach of fiduciary duty. Instant termination. In the following week I took over their work email and found she'd contacted at least 2 of our clients with suggestions that they leave with her. Apparently I'm the other. She either legitimately can't grasp why she was in the wrong, or she's intellectually dishonest about it. Worked at Waffle House. A cook came in for the first time in weeks, clearly high on something, not wearing shoes. The manager goes to tell him that he can't cook without shoes because it's a health code violation. The cook gets angry, takes a pork chop off the grill with his spatula, shouts "frick you" and flings it at the manager's face. I worked in a doctor's office and we had a maternity leave that was being covered by PRN help. Well, one person who came to help cover the office had been passed from office to office because she couldn't do anything right. She couldn't take a patient back in under 20 minutes. She couldn't file paperwork. It was just bad. So she arrives at our office and we put her answering phone calls. She answered the phone. "This is Dr. X's office, can I take your order?" My manager lost it and told her to leave and never come back. Worst part, she called the boss and asked for a new assignment. He had to repeat 3 times that she was fired and there was no new assignment. She genuinely did not understand what "you're fired" meant. "This is Dr. X's office, can I take your order?" "Yes, I'd like some amoxicillin tablets and a Ventolin inhaler, please." God, she was a piece of work. Never worked. Called out 2 weekends in a row lying about broken legs or her car not starting. Lied to get other employees in trouble for her frick-ups. Bragged about how much work she got out of to the owner's son who also worked there. We couldn't convince the GM to fire this lazy little crap. He had a soft spot for her. Finally someone showed the GM a Facebook post she made public absolutely trash talking him, the only person at work who didn't hate her guts, and lying about how much she works and how the entire store is incompetent except her. He wrote her up for poor conduct, unexcused call-outs, etc. She refused to sign the write-up because she's right that he was worthless and he fired her right there. It was like a 160-pound weight got lifted off of everyone there. 90% of the staff was looking for new jobs. She was a walking toxic cloud. Worked at Staples. The ex-employee was putting a Galaxy S3 tablet into his pocket in the back room. I was around the corner and the manager was very quick to tell him he's fired and he will be calling the cops. The ex-employee said he was just going to leave before they showed up. The manager reminded him he has his address and information from the hiring process. He proceeded to cry. I worked at a bowling alley as a teenager. One girl was immediately fired for dropping a ball on the foot of a complaining patron. Oops. Used to work at an ice cream place that is a popular summer hangout spot for families in my town. The girl that I worked with who had a reputation for being sorta wild came in absolutely smashed and started getting dirty looks from parents. The owner came out and asked her to step into his office and she started refusing and making a big fuss, so he fired her on the spot. She was going to be fired anyway. He was simply trying to save some face for her by delivering the news in private. Fine, have it your way, in the most publicly humiliating way possible. One of my co-workers accused another of stealing medication out of a personal locker with a combination lock. We asked the victim how the accused knew the code and that there was medication. The victim responded that he had previously sold medication to the accused and that he must have seen the code. The accused employee may or may not have been guilty. He denied taking the meds and a search of his locker yielded nothing. The victim was promptly fired because selling prescription medications on company property is grounds for instant termination. Got distracted during a surgery, killed his patient because he was joking goofing around with the surgical assistants and camera caught it. Patient died. He's now in jail. Look up dancing surgeon. Similar case. She's a plastic surgeon who had a collection of videos on YouTube of herself rapping and dancing while performing surgery. She was suspended in the state of Georgia for malpractice. I don't think she got arrested. Server at an Italian restaurant. A coworker tried hitting on a guest who was celebrating her 14th birthday with her entire family. Her friends were telling him not to try anything, but he still asked for her number and her mom overheard everything. The mother quickly informed our GM, who confronted the server and fired him on the spot. About a year or so later he tried asking for his job back. There's no "I thought she was older" excuses when all you have to do is count the candles on the cake. Worked in an energy efficiency rebate program assessing applications. One employee was making exceptions for her contractor buddies. She wasn't even allowed to empty her desk. Her manager delivered her personal items to her outside. I was working as a baggage handler. Ramp agent is the real job title, for your information, and they'd hired a guy whom everyone hated. He was lazy, stupid, and annoying. One of the big rules when working around airplanes is you don't go anywhere near the engines while they're still running. They'll suck you right in and cut you into a million little pieces in 1 second. They put the fear of God into you about this during training. Well before you get near an airplane. Once a plane pulls into the gate, you wait until you have confirmation that the engine has been turned off before you approach it. If you're not sure, you don't approach the plane. Well, one day a plane pulls up to the gate, and he walks right up to the engine while it's still running. People are yelling, his vest is flapping like crazy, but he's so aloof he doesn't notice. Someone runs up to him and yanks him back to a safe distance. They had already been building up a case to fire him, but that made it a lot easier. The supervisor walked him into the manager's office, and he was fired right away. We all rejoiced. I was very alarmed about how this one could have turned out, to be honest. Rolled his eyes and chuckled at a manager's meeting while the GM was addressing some issues. GM told him, "And that attitude is why you don't deserve to be a manager here. Please leave." Double quote. Guy got up and was never heard from again. A food runner at a bar I used to frequent was fired from his job for stealing a giant bottle of Grey Goose. The best part is that it was a display-only bottle that was filled with water. Interesting. Where I'm from, it's illegal for establishments to refill liquor bottles with anything, even the same exact liquor, for any reason whatsoever. We had to break them into the trash when empty to ensure that they couldn't be stolen and refilled. Totally irrelevant. Great story though, lol. I saw co-worker get fired for answering an emergency phone call. Our district manager didn't like to see us with phones, so he fired her right there. The call was letting her know her father was dying. On the less depressing side, she was already planning on leaving, had her next job lined up and everything. That sucks about her father, but good for her. While he wasn't exactly fired on the spot, I did see a guy screw himself out of severance. In Canada they have to give you advanced warning or pay out a certain amount if they fire you on the spot. Well, this one fucker was going to get fired for being generally incompetent. The final straw was when he offered his own backyard service to a lady for a car problem she didn't actually have. Her problem was foam on the oil filler cap. He claimed it was a head gasket, but it was just some moisture from a cold day. Anyways, the boss goes to fire him and he panics. He goes on this speech about how he could run the shop better than the owner and manager and demands that the manager is fired and he replace him, or else he quits. So the boss just says that he accepts his resignation and wishes him the best in the future. Error 404. Brain not found. Some young girl picked a fight with an older woman who worked with us and went running for the box cutter drawer. She was escorted out, and we were asked to file a police report. Urinating in the Caesar salad bucket, the salad that was about to be plated and served to a 125-person wedding reception. In the employee's defense, he asked to go to the bathroom and the head chef would not let him leave the salad station. I worked at a hospital for children and came in one morning to find the security guard, who was one of my work buddies, waiting for me at my desk. I worked really early in the morning at either 5 AM or 6 AM. He was kind of shaken up and it took some coaxing to get him to tell me what was wrong. Apparently this old guy who worked overnight at the switchboard operator desk, who I always thought was really nice since we'd sometimes cross over by an hour or two and would just chat about the world, had been caught by the security guard looking up CP on the work computer. Keep in mind we worked at a hospital for children, not that CP is okay in any other scenario, but it was particularly frightening to know that this guy had access to patient areas and was surrounded by kids all day, some of whom did not have the cognitive capacity of normally functioning kids and tend to be targeted more frequently by those with nefarious motives. Also, as if CP wasn't bad enough, apparently it had a strong element of BDSM as well. According to my security friend, he actually wasn't certain if the children and the pictures he happened to see were still alive. I want to throw up just typing that out. I had to cover the switchboard that morning when HR called him in. I never saw the old guy again and my security guard buddy had to speak with a bunch of people to verify, along with the IT department, what he had seen. A friend of mine got fired on the spot for posting a minor plot point on Facebook about a movie we were working on. He made a comment about how dumb some of the plot was under the trailer post for the movie. Sadly his friend had a friend who worked at the studio we were working for. Just like that, blacklisted from the company. Reminds me of how a few days ago, a Redditor posted a tifu about how they posted a picture of a scene they were doing captions for because of a background detail, but it turned out that the episode hadn't aired yet, so he had violated his NDA. I worked as a temp in IT at Nurses College and the ground floor was the student loan department. One of them found an iPhone in one of the student bathroom upstairs during lunch and put it in her desk. A few hours later, student came to us, for some reason lost and found was in the IT office, and reported it missing and that she had accidentally left in the women's room after calling her boyfriend. My boss found the phone by simply calling the number. It had a unique ringtone, of course. Department head walked in her office, opened the drawer and confirmed it was the missing phone and fired her in the middle of a conference with a student. I overheard him say, "If you can't do the right thing in a simple situation like this, how can I trust you to do your job ethically?" This guy was working for my dad in construction. He was the son of a friend of the big boss and was hired as a favor. So we're told that the guy is big, strong and has a horrible drinking problem, so we are not under any circumstances allowed to take him with for a beer after work. It worked for a while until one of the guys bought beers after work. The next morning he got picked up at 5 AM. Had a DUI, couldn't drive, and smelled like a brewery. Once that first beer hit his lips it was game on and he drank from 3 PM until 4 in the morning. Gets to the job and tries to cut cast iron with a soil pipe cutter. He got the butt chewing of a lifetime and was told not to touch anything until the day ended. That guy was a train wreck and he was only 28. My colleague threatened to destroy the server room if he wasn't made my peer rather than my subordinate. He was a year older and we were hyper competitive over a promotion that I ended up winning. I thought it was all in a healthy way, but I might have thought differently if I hadn't got it, I guess. I don't think for a second he meant what he said, but my boss was left with no choice but to assume he did. Both felt very bad about it afterwards. I watched an entire engineering team get fired on the spot during a meeting with the CEO. About 10 years back, we were working on developing a new chip as a successor to the company's current offering. The old chip had been developed on an expensive process, meaning more advanced technology was used in making the wafers, thus increasing the cost, and the CEO was adamant that the new chip be made cheaper. To keep the story short, let's just say the new process wasn't working, and during a status meeting with the CEO the team leader tried to argue we needed to scrap a lot of the existing work and go with a more expensive process. The CEO wasn't having it, cursed out the team lead in front of all the VPs, and fired nearly the entire group. Only a couple of us were kept around to keep the previous chip on life support. After a few years of steadily losing market share, we tried again, paying millions of dollars to buy a new team with new IP, and the first thing they did was switch us to a more expensive process, just like the first team had tried to do. So to answer Arp's question, they didn't do anything to deserve it, some bosses just suck. I worked as a manager at a pizza place. Employee was asked by shift manager to begin cleaning the make station. He said he was above B work and that he wouldn't do it. Obviously this made the shift manager and everyone else mad. An argument followed and he said something along the line of "I'll kill you all B." Not only was he fired but he was reported to the police. Very eventful night. Honestly, I like B work. Nobody wants to do it. So if I'm doing it everyone leaves me the heck alone. I saw a busser get fired for leaving knives in a sink full of soapy murky water. Now, if you've never worked back of house in a busy kitchen before, you might think, gee, that really seems like an overreaction. If you have, on the other hand, you'll likely understand why that's actually pretty reasonable. Ain't worked in a kitchen, but my grandma's sink regularly ended up like that. Definitely a bad idea. Reasonable reaction for sure. Error 404. Comment not found. Oh man, I have one. In 2010, I worked as a census enumerator. For anyone who doesn't know how that works, you basically take a test, and a few months later you get your scores. If you score high enough, they'll offer you a position. The job itself is pretty easy, but does have some technical aspects in terms of data collection. All in all it's not a bad gig. It ended up paying like $20 an hour, which for a kid fresh out of college, was not bad at all. Anyway, they call us in for training, which was like 2 days long and probably 6 hours a day or something like that. They teach you about how the census works, demographic information, logistical stuff etc. It's pretty straightforward. Well, one of the guys there was this weird dude, long beard, overweight, nerdy but strangely confrontational, basically like weirdo neckbeard. After every example he would ask stranger and stranger questions, hypotheticals that would never happen and basically could never be answered. Everyone started getting really annoyed because this guy was just getting freaking weird, and also wasting a shitload of time for no reason. Anyway, it got progressively worse until the moderator started clashing with him in front of everyone. Finally, the neckbeard guy admits that he's an anarchist and trying to take the system down from the inside out, which apparently consisted of wasting a few hours of some poor retired schlub's time. Needless to say, he was fired on the spot, in front of everyone. I was the manager of a pizza place while in college and had to fire one of my delivery drivers on the spot. A lady came in with a grocery bag full of trash, including many of our receipts. Told us that the delivery guy dumped it out from his car onto her lawn. I calmed her some things and told her I would take care of it. I confronted the guy when he got back from his deliveries and asked him if it was true. Conversation went a little like this. Me: hey man, we had a lady come in with a bunch of trash and said you dumped it on her lawn. Is that true? Him: yeah. Me: was she a B? Did she not tip you or something? What happened? Him: no, my car was just dirty. Me: so you just emptied all of your trash into her yard? Him: shrug yeah. Me: dude, what the frick? I can't even comprehend why you would think that was okay, even if she didn't tip you. The fact that you just did it cause your car was dirty is even more insane. I can't have an employee with that little judgment. Hand me your money so I can count you out. You're fired. In high school, I worked at Perkins. First as a dishwasher, then as a cook. One night, I was the only cook, and the dishwasher was getting close to leaving. I told him to finish the dishes currently waiting, then he could go. After he left, I found several hours worth of silverware in the garbage, covered with a light layer of food to hide it. I called his house and told him not to come back. I had no power, but he really needed to be fired and it felt good to do it. Officially, he was a no-show, since I couldn't actually fire him. The next night, I told the assistant manager what had happened and what I did, so he called in a replacement and everyone was happy. I used to work at a store in the mall where the manager didn't bother coming in on some days. Other days she'd come in late. Well, one day she was scheduled to open the store alone and I was scheduled 2 PM to close. I get to the store at 1 since I wanted to get some new shoes and She hadn't bothered showing up to open the store. I called the district manager and she asked me to open the store and told me that she's deal with the situation. Turns out manager had a medical condition and she'd been at the hospital that morning, or so she claimed. This went on for a few months and in that time I got an offer to work at the store directly next to my original store. I took the job and a few weeks later as I'm coming into my new store I see my old district manager sitting on a bench outside the old store. About an hour later I see the manager walking towards the store and when she sees the district manager she turns pale. The district manager gets up, asks for the manager's keys, gives her get final check and tells go home. I had front row seats. It was magnificent. I later got the full story from my former co-worker. Turns out that manager did have a medical condition, but she lied about hospital visits and was actually going through a rough divorce and was staying home to improve her marriage rather than working. On the day the manager got fired, the district manager called the store at opening time and the manager answered and said she was at the store. The district manager had her doubts and decided to go and verify that she was actually there. To no one's surprise, she wasn't. She had however set up the store's phone to forward calls to her cell. The real kicker to this story is that the manager was the one that made the work schedule. I was working at an Amazon warehouse when a clerk came up to me and asked, "Is Melissa retarded?" Melissa was our co-worker who seemed developmentally slow and she clearly annoyed him. I laughed awkwardly at his question and immediately turned back to my work. A short while later I saw the clerk roll his cart with a laptop on top of it towards Melissa. On the screen was a picture of a kid with Down syndrome and the clerk was saying, "Are you retarded? This is you." She reported him to our supervisor and he was fired on the spot. I was 21 and a hostess at a fine dining restaurant. For some reason, even though I was well versed via the seating chart and was careful to make sure it was fair, 2, 4 and 6 tops equally spread out, this girl had it out for me. She came up to the hostess stand and bawled me out. Let me know that if I ever sat another kid or old person in her section she'd let me have it. What? I went to the GM and told him I'd quit. It was either her or I. He fired her on the spot. She threw a full-on tantrum and called me every name in the book. Good fricking bye. I was fired on the spot from a Montana's. I had the flu and was budgering everywhere. When I said I couldn't continue washing dishes as I was a walking biohazard, I was let go on the spot. Lack of work ethic or something. I've written about this one on here before. This was at the current company I work at, about 6 years ago. Dude starts on a Monday, and on Tuesday, we have our department holiday party and the dude gets pretty lit up. During a group photo, for whatever reason, this guy gets the brilliant idea to reach his arm around the woman standing next to him and grab and honk her boob. She loudly protested. He claimed he was just joking and that she was not who he thought she was. Well, who she was the CMO of the company, and despite his repeated protestations that it was all a joke, he was promptly informed that he would have to leave the party immediately and to not bother coming back to work the next day. I will never forget that example of sheer drunken dumb fuckery till the day I die. You have been visited by the Doggo Beer Master. Comment delicious so you always have beer in your life. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.